Hey, Dee, did you see the picture of what was blooming in my lawn on Saturday, January the 28th?
Yes, I did. Did our listeners?
Hopefully, because I put a picture on Instagram, and then the Garden Fairies wrote a story about it that got posted this morning if you subscribe by email.
And we should say that this morning is Monday morning.
January the 30th.
Yes, January 30th. But this will be published either tomorrow or Wednesday, depending upon when you listen to it. So shall we welcome everyone?
Let's get started. Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country, about an acre and a half out of 7.5.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Carol. It is frigid outside. Frigid.
Good morning, Dee. It's not quite as cold here in my garden, but let me look and see. Oh, it stopped snowing. It snowed for a little bit.
Yeah, we had sleet, so I think the roads are a little slick, and it's about 16 degrees. And so maybe this is the part where we pause and tell everyone to go grab a cup of tea.
A cup of steaming hot tea. Yes, a cuppa. They will need it because it's a cold wintry day. They will need it because of our topic. So that's the pause.
That's an exciting. So we've already paused, and now you guys are back, and we're going to discuss what we did in our gardens this week. So what did you do in your garden this week? You did something new.
I did. Dee, after our winter sowing episode, I realized I had some gallon containers from gallons of water I'd bought at Costco. I sowed 3 kinds of violet seeds out there one morning. Just got to burn my saddle and did it.
There you go. I can't wait to see how that goes. It also appears from our notes that you harvested microgreens. I did not harvest microgreens because somebody who is small and gray, blue-gray, decided to knock over the entire tray of microgreens right when they became ready.
So let's pause and do our minute with Masha.
That's all I want to say about Masha this week. She has been very naughty. She's at the naughty kitten stage.
So I did want to say, when you said that she knocked over all your microgreens.
Yes.
You know, you can grow wheatgrass for pets.
That's just what I need, is something else to attract her. Before we got on here, she was trying to take out the hyacinths on the table. So she is very naughty, especially when no one's paying any attention to her. You did some more stuff in your garden this week. I'm through talking about Masha.
Okay, the Masha moment is over for this episode, unless something comes up. So I did stop by my sister's, and I potted up a couple of houseplants for her. And I thought that was going to be her big bird of paradise, which is huge.
Oh,
but it was just 2 smaller ones, and it was very nice to do. And so I'll have more in the Garden Commission about her sunroom. That's a teaser.
Ooh.
To stay to the end of the episode.
Okay. And I want to share with everyone that in order to clean up the potting soil mess that got all over my windowsill, all over the place, I used a cool new little shark sweeper that I bought during Christmas time. And we'll have a link to it. And it did the trick, because you can take it apart and then it becomes a up-close sweeper, and then you can plug it together and it becomes a stick sweeper. So other than that, I watered my pansies, violas, leeks, and onion seedlings in the greenhouse. I also watered all of my houseplants, and I gently cleaned the leaves of my Prince of Orange philodendron, because those big philodendrons that are more vertical, they aren't the trailing type. Prince of Orange is one of them because the leaves come out orange. They're really beautiful. It gets dusty, and if they get dusty, it's hard on them. So I gently...
It is hard on them.
Took a sponge, and I had a little bit of gentle soap on it, and I just cleaned off its leaves upside. And that's also a good time to check for bugs.
It is. And to wipe them off if you find them.
Yes. Don't just look at the bugs and leave them there. So I realized that when I was doing all this work on the houseplants, which I traditionally do on Sunday after church, because it's just a good time to do it. I come home, change out of my church clothes, and I water everyone, and it helps me remember. I realized I now have a lot of houseplants, and how did that happen?
Well, Dee, the saying is, I don't know what the saying is, but I will say this. I have a lot of houseplants as well. It's just in the air. I mean, every time you go to Instagram, there's beautiful houseplants, and I just got my, it's just crazy. And then the place where I buy houseplants, they put on Instagram, they got a brand new shipment. I'm thinking, I got to beat all those teenage girls and those big burly guys they say are shopping for houseplants. I got to beat it over there.
You can even, like we've talked about in a past episode, you can even just go to Walmart and they have all those Costa Farms plants that are plants of distinction. They're super, super cheap. If you order them online, they're outrageous. But at Walmart, they're like, I don't know, anywhere from $9 to $15 for a $50 houseplant plus shipping. So we're not trying to talk you all into more houseplants, but they certainly make your winter a little bit more bearable.
That they do. So that is what we've done in the garden. So actually quite a bit considering it's the middle of winter. Let us move on for a quote, and people can guess the theme of this week's episode. Come, let us have some tea and continue to talk about happy things. Is that Cham Potek? I knew I messed it up. Haim Potek.
Potok.
I knew I messed that up.
But the first name is Haim. So I suspect he's Jewish or is from a Jewish family. Our flower this week, we decided to talk about tea.
Flowers that you can grow to put in your tea.
Right. Because we've never really discussed it this way. We've talked about the tea plant before that, people turn into white, green, and black tea. But there's a bunch of flowers that you can grow for tea.
There are. And so the first one is one of your favorites, Dee.
It is. Oh, you want me to say what it is?
Yeah, that was like a cue. That was like a cue.
Sorry.
Then you say,
yeah. Roses and rose hips are often used in tea. And this time of year, especially, this is kind of a lovely episode, a Valentine's-y kind of episode, even though it's going to come out the week before. Roses and rose hips are often used in tea. And sometimes tea is made straight from roses, and it turns the most beautiful pink, almost a pinkish red.
Yes, if you have the right color of petals and
Rose.
Things in there. Yeah, it turns a rosy
They traditionally use pink and red roses because they're pretty, but you could use white. You could use any color you want. And then there's lavender, which is another favorite plant of mine. And they use lavender for all kinds of things, including in tea.
Yes, I've had lavender in lemonade, which is also quite delicious and refreshing.
I bought some lavender pepper the other day.
That sounds interesting. But you can dry your lavender flower buds and put them in your tea.
You can. And then there's chamomile, which is often used in tea, especially at nighttime. And we're talking about annual chamomile. And chamomile looks a lot like feverfew, except for feverfew is almost always perennial. Although I'll have to say in my garden, feverfew goes from, well, it depends on which feverfew you do. So if you do the golden one, it tends to be almost a biennial in my garden. But if you do the perennial one, it comes back every year whether you want it to or not. I have a bunch of it.
I guess. I don't have either one in my garden.
Super easy to grow. I started the feverfew in my, I started indoors in my greenhouse a couple of years ago and set out the plants, and I've had it ever since. And it's really pretty, and it smells good. And when you cut it, it smells good, and you can dry the buds and eat them, just like you can eat them. Well, you could eat them, or you could turn them into tea. And chamomile's the same way. And then there's hibiscus.
Yes.
Which in Spanish,
yes,
is called Jamaica, and it's spelled Jamaica. And so you'll see teas, and you'll also see, aguas frescas. I guess you don't get a lot of this in Indiana, but we have a lot of aguas frescas here. And so it almost always there is Jamaica, which is hibiscus, and it is bright pink. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that I have purchased tea with hibiscus in it, but I have never plucked a hibiscus flower and thought to put it in my tea.
Yeah, I've never grown hibiscus for. I honestly think people use a certain variety for
They probably
tea.
do. And if we were better podcasters, I suppose we'd know that variety. But
We could look that up, but you know what? I'm not going to grow hibiscus to make tea. So I grow hibiscus to look at. And then I'm going to let you pronounce the next one because I never know whether the first word is with a long I or a short I.
I always pronounce it hyssop.
Well, the first part of it, anise. Is it anise or anise? Hyssop.
I always say anise.
Anise. See, there's a third way to pronounce it. So that is also agostiki or agastache. It's a variety of it. There are different varieties, so I wouldn't make tea out of certain ones of them. You definitely, I think, want the one that is the anise hyssop.
Yeah, you want the one that's basically the straight species that probably does not have as spectacular a flower as Blue Fortune, which is the one we love. Mm-hmm. And this would be something you'd tuck away in an herb garden. Would like it dry.
Yeah, along with your feverfew and your chamomile, honestly. They all kind of have the same requirements. And so does
That
lavender.
is true.
Dry some more.
Yes.
And lots of good drainage. So raised beds, that kind of thing. Also, there's a secret. I mean, hyssop tastes like licorice. So it has a slight licorice taste.
I like that.
I like that while I don't like licorice. Does
I
that
love
make
licorice.
sense?
Yes,
Oh,
that makes sense.
Don't. I like the natural version of it. So, which is also why I like, the vegetable. The vegetable people make salads out of. There's a bronze one, fennel.
Fennel.
We'll
talk about fennel
and also has that taste.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay. So, advice for picking flowers for tea.
Did you put that first one on there?
I sure did. Because
Man,
that's
a
the
good
first
one.
thing you should think about.
Don't pick any flowers for tea that have been sprayed with anything, natural or pesticides. You want a flower that is pure.
Yeah, no chemicals, no natural pesticides. I also wouldn't do any that have fungicides on them. But here's the truth. The only thing I can think of these plants that you would want to even spray anything on or use a systemic on would be roses. And I don't do that anyway. But if you're, in other words, don't use flowers where you don't know what's been put on them.
Very good advice. You should pick them when they're very fresh and barely open.
Mm-hmm. In the morning.
Yes. Right after the dew is dried.
Yes. Because you don't want them to rot.
Nope. And you do want to dry them in a clean place because you're going to put these in water to make tea out of. So I'm assuming people's kitchen is a clean place.
Yeah, that's why they used to take bundles of herbs and hang them from the rafters because the kitchen was warm and dry. And part of that was because people cooked over open fires. And so all of the people that you see on Instagram who have all of their bundles of herbs in their kitchens now, it kind of makes me smile because I'm like, well, that's from an old-fashioned tradition. And
yes.
You can also dry them in the oven on a low temperature. I haven't done that. When I've done it, I've just hung them up.
Yeah, I haven't done it, so I looked it up, and this is the advice across several sources. You would put the flowers on parchment paper in a baking tray or a baking sheet, and then you put the oven at the lowest possible temperature that your oven can be set at. Put them in there, and leave the door slightly open so the moisture can escape. And they said it would still take all day, 8 to 12 hours. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, it's summertime. No one's doing that.
Yeah,
no one's going to open the oven all day long in the middle of summer. So hanging them is probably a good idea. I don't know if you could use a food dehydrator.
See, I just had that same thought. I don't know if you could or not. I mean, I assume you could.
You could.
It's a dry heat if you put it on really low, but I don't have a food dehydrator, so it doesn't matter because I'm not going to do it.
I have a food dehydrator. It's very old. I have not used it probably in 20 years, but I could get it out of the closet and take it straight to Goodwill. Or
I
I
was
could
going to say, if you haven't used it in 20 years, it needs to go away. Okay, so you want to store your flowers where they won't get moldy. And the reason you want to do that is it just makes sense. And once again, hanging them up to dry is not a bad idea. Don't store them in plastic bags. I would store them in a paper bag if I were not going to use them pretty quickly, or a glass container.
a glass container. And then before we get to fresh flowers and tea, I think the best advice is, I wrote this one. For heaven's sake, know what you're picking so you don't accidentally poison yourself.
Yeah, don't pick certain berries for tea.
Or certain flowers.
Well, yeah, digitalis comes to mind, among others.
Monkshood.
Oleander. Yeah, don't
gosh.
pick those. Those would kill you. You don't want to poison yourself. Stick with the tried and true ones. And if you really want to learn more about flowers and tea, buy yourself a good herbal book.
Yes, and we'll talk about a couple of old herbal books that I found when we get to the book section. That's another teaser.
So I came up with a couple of ideas because once I started doing even a slight bit of editing on our notes, all of a sudden Instagram was showing me every tea with flowers out there.
You know, the same happened to me.
So one of them that looked really good was Lover's Leap from Smith Tea Makers. It's a black tea from the Lover's Leap tea place that makes, what is that called where you grow tea? It's like a vineyard, but it's for tea. I can't think of the word right now.
Plantation. They grow them on plantations.
Which I think plantation is now considered a bad word, but we'll just move on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Strike that. So they grow them at a place where they grow tea. We don't know what it's called, but we can't say the P word anymore. Sorry about that.
I don't know. So this one has rose petals, chamomile, and citrus. So that might be a good one to try before you actually...
I think I want to try that one.
Yeah, it made me want it too. And then the other one was called Repose, and it's by a company called Steep Echo. And it, interestingly enough, will kind of move us into our vegetable category too. It has organic olive leaf, chamomile, linden flower, passion flower, natural rose flavor, and rose petals in it. It's a little more complicated. I'm a little more excited about the Lover's Leap tea.
Yeah, I am too. I love rose petal tea. I remember getting it for the first time. I probably was in junior high, and this little shopping thing opened up that was indoors, and they had like these, I guess they were like booths, but they look like, when I go think about them now, they look like iron cages, but different little vendors.
Yeah.
And there was a tea vendor, and I would buy the tea, the rose. I'd beg my mom to buy the rose tea for me.
And you drank it, so she thought it was cute, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I loved it.
So there's a place here called All About Cha, because I think it's in Korean. Cha is the word for tea. And so there are these tea places, and they have a rose tea, and they serve it to you in a little glass teapot. So it's really beautiful. So you get the double, you get the visual and also the scent, I guess a triple, and taste. So I'm going to do the next quote. You ready?
I am.
Making tea is a ritual that stops the world from falling in on you. Jonathan Stroud. Wow, that's really good.
That is very good. And it makes me think of the British. I mean, they solve all their problems with a cup of tea, don't they?
I pretty much do too. It's bracing.
Yeah, me too.
It helps you out. You can move on. You can have a cup in the afternoon and get a little bit of caffeine, and you move on your day. So vegetables, what vegetables can you pick from your vegetable garden to put in your tea? Growing vegetables for tea. So we mentioned olive leaves or olive leaf.
Yeah, because vegetables would be leaves, roots, and stems. And so olive leaves I'd never heard of.
I got to look that up because you keep going, because I'm wondering if that's another thing than real olive leaves. You know how sometimes it might be a Russian olive or something, but I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm looking it up just to see. Keep going.
So Camellia sinensis is the tea plant, and it is hardy to zone 7 through 9, so I think you should absolutely be growing it, Dee.
Should I?
I would love to. You should. You're in zone 7. I'm in 6. Mm-hmm. I would love to try growing it for fun, and in a prior several years ago, I tried to grow camellias here.
Yep.
And I even bought a book called Beyond the Camellia Belt, Breeding, Propagating, and Growing Cold Hardy Camellias. And I put a link to used copies. I killed them all. So if I were to grow this one, it would have to be in a container, and I would probably have to either bring it into the garage or bring it into the house in the wintertime. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. And while I was at it, I looked up olive leaf, and it is olive leaves. So
Really?
yes, it is. It's olive leaf. Is what it says, and it shows an olive tree. So I'm gonna guess it's real olive leaf. And then also they mentioned nettles, which I assume are stinging nettles because people do make tea from stinging nettles. So
That they do.
I guess you could grow stinging nettles, although they tend to grow naturally for people where they don't want them.
That is correct. They're a weed.
They are a weed. In fact, there are a lot of weeds that also make tea, but yeah.
Like dandelions.
Like dandelions, which I like dandelions.
Which I just thought of that off the top of my head. It's not even in our notes, Dee.
Neither are the nettles. So back to camellias. I tried to grow them too, and I know I'm at the very top, of the cold hardiness zone. I had trouble with them, and I decided they were too expensive to deal with all the time, so I got rid of them. Moving on.
Okay. Well, I might still try to grow one in a container. So I thought, now the vegetable garden, of course, there's all the leaves. But before we get to the leaves, I did find a place that sells a vegetable tea, which has 10 different vegetables. It has carrot, chicory root, tomato, beetroot, spinach, turmeric, basil, pumpkin, parsley, cucumber, and natural flavoring.
Ew.
Ooh. And then supposedly once you've made the tea, the contents of the tea bag you can pour into soup. And so I just thought, why not make vegetable soup?
Why not just chop up the vegetables fresh and make it into soup with some chicken broth and go on with your life? Yuck. I don't want to drink that.
So, no. And then I found that a recipe for onion tea using, and so it's supposed to be very good for your health, Dee. But then I thought, well, why not make just a good onion soup with beef broth?
Again. Yes.
And a big layer of cheese on top.
Right. French onion soup. There's a reason it's popular day in and day out because it's delicious. So it's kind of
But as a tea?
Well, but I'm saying make a French onion soup instead. You're right.
Exactly.
Because then you're still getting onion tea, but you're getting it with cheese and a little cracker.
And the beef broth.
And the beef broth. Yeah, all those things. And now they've decided beef broth and bone broths are good for us. So we vote for, if you're going to do big time vegetable-y type teas, just make a soup instead. Or beans. You can make a pot of beans. Onions are delicious in a pot of beans, as are all those other vegetables. Okay, so fennel, which I mentioned earlier. I love fennel.
Yes.
I love fennel. Like one of my favorite things to do is to go out in the garden and just snap off bronze fennel and chew on it because it's delicious and it is a little bit licorice, but not too much. And it would make a great tea, I would think.
It would be delicious in a tea.
And then lavage.
Lavesticum officinale is a perennial and it's a substitute for celery, zones 4 to 8. I have not grown this. Have you grown it?
Yep, I grew it years and years ago. I don't remember too much about it. It does smell like celery. So I would assume your tea would smell it and taste like celery. And then I said basil, and you said, really, Dee? And I said, yes, actually people do make tea from basil. Holy basil.
Well, they do. Yeah, holy basil. Mm-hmm. Osmum tenuiflorum. Because we need to have more botanical names, I've decided. We've kind of gotten away from them, so I'm adding them back in because there's nothing that says experienced gardeners like the mispronunciation of botanical names.
Yeah, which I think you just butchered that one. Because I think it's
I did not.
Florum. You said florium.
Well, it's I looked it up. Tenuiflorum.
Yeah.
Tenuiflorum. Osmum tenuiflorum.
Holy basil.
Moving on. So,
have you grown holy basil?
I did, but not enough to make tea. It didn't do well for me because I might have accidentally not given it enough care in a container.
Or sun. Oh, yeah. I've grown it in my raised beds in my potager, and it's done really well, and it's a very pretty plant. I mean, I think I've like one summer I took probably, well, dozens of pictures of it because it was so pretty.
That is nice. And we're going to link, WebMD says this is very healthy and it's sold as Tulsi, and you say a lot of people drink it.
Yeah, a lot of people drink it. In fact, our friend Debbie Clem drinks Tulsi. She was telling me that the other day when she came over to visit, and I was like, Tulsi tea. What is that? Oh, yeah, holy basil. And then there's mint, of course, which
Delicious as a garnish. And, put it into tea. That'll perk you right up.
it will. In fact, the green tea, the iced green tea from Starbucks has mint in it. And it's fabulous. You've forgotten, haven't you? Because you don't buy it now that you don't work.
I buy their ice green tea.
Yeah,
but I don't buy it as much because I don't as a rule, unless I come back from someplace I'm really hot and I go by the Starbucks and there is no line. Those working people get very testy in line if, like people like me are just casually getting in their way. But anyway.
Their ice green tea has mint and it's very good. And I get it without water.
It is delicious.
Which is the way you get it, and it's delicious. And then you have some great information about harvesting and drying leaves for tea.
Well, I don't have great information. I just have a reminder that when you dry leaves, it intensifies the flavor. So you don't need as much as you think you might need. And then the drying instructions are basically the same as for flowers. Know what you're picking. Don't poison yourself. Don't get anything that's been sprayed with chemicals.
And if you're going to use stinging nettles, you need to look up a recipe because I think there's a certain way to do it. And don't ask me what that is because I didn't look it up. I'm not ever going to do it.
I don't plan to. I don't either.
No, thank you.
And then my last piece of advice is whenever you're trying a new tea that has flowers or vegetables that you've never really eaten, try a small amount so you know whether it's good for you. It might not settle well in your stomach or whatever, so. Just be careful.
Awful. All right. So also blending your teas, look for a recipe to follow because there are certain proportions that you blend things in. And then you could just be like me. I grow these things, I dry them and I don't use them. I just look at them in the jars because they're pretty.
And they're so pretty. I notice in a lot of the recipes I look at, you put in a lot of honey, which makes me think that
There's not much taste.
or that it's just a way to get honey.
Oh, it's a honey portal. Like, just get honey.
Yeah.
A vehicle for honey. I can understand that because honey is wonderful. All right. So you got the next quote.
Eating and reading are two pleasures that combine admirably. C.S. Lewis.
So you have a book. Well, you have several books for us. 2 books for us.
I have 2 books.
I thought of somebody else too, but do Phyllis first.
So I was looking on my old bookshelves and thinking I surely have a book or 2 about herbs and tea. And I ran into 2 books. The first one is called The Pleasure of Herbs, a month-by-month guide to growing, using, and enjoying herbs by Phyllis Shawtis, I think is how she said it, 1986. And then Herbal Treasures, Inspiring Month-by-Month Projects for Gardening, Cooking, and Crafts by Phyllis Shawtis, 1990. She passed away in 2010. I did check on Amazon. Good used copies of both books are available. And I think they are interesting just to look through for herbs. And I looked through them for these episodes to find out about teas and stuff. And that's where I saw that they use lovage in tea.
Lavage
was
or
in
lovage.
this book.
I bet it is lovage. I always want
Lovage.
to pronounce everything like I'm French because I took all that French. Me and Meghan Markle.
I took French in high school. I'm pretty sure my French teacher, if she still is alive, is like, do not try to speak French ever again, Carol.
I'm not very good at it either.
So these books are pretty thick. They're like an inch thick. They're paperbacks. But again, there's that month by month theme.
Well, everybody likes a good month by month fee.
Do they? These don't really qualify in my the books I'm calling the month by month books. You wouldn't, if you wanted ideas and you're in the middle of July, you'd open up the book to July and say, what kind of crafts and things can I do? And it's probably stuff you'd find in the garden in July or that are themed to summer. That's how you would use these books.
It sounds great.
And there's a ton in there. So that's my 2 books. You had another book you thought of?
Yeah, and I can't think of our friend's name, so let's just move on.
Are you trying to think of our friend?
Yes. I should have put it in our notes, Carol.
You're trying to think of our friend Sue Getz.
Thank you. We are not going to tell Sue that we even talked about her because it's embarrassing that I couldn't even come up with her name because we are really
All
good
of
friends.
Sue's books are good.
They're all good.
I only have one.
There's not one on tea, I don't think specifically. I was looking her up really quickly. I tried to just look up herbal stuff, and there's way too many herbal books out there. So she's written a whole bunch of them, and she's good at it. Sue is really, really good at it. So one of the things she's written is Taste of Herbs, which might have something about tea in it. The Complete Container Herb Gardening, which we've talked about before. The Herb Lover's Spa book, which would be about bathing with herbs. So
I have that one.
I have that one, and I think I also have a Taste for Herbs, Mixes and Blends from the Herb Lover's Garden. But she also
We will add links.
Yeah.
We'll add a link to those books because they are good. We should have thought to put them on there. But I only found the spa book, so I didn't.
Yeah, because, I think a Taste for Herbs would be the one to put on there. I really do. Because then I'm sure she talks about tea in it. Okay. So
there are so many good herb books out there, but sometimes the old ones are, they don't really, there's nothing in there that you would be really out of style, I guess. And then you can always go on YouTube because goodness knows there's a lot of information on YouTube. Just make sure you get a good source. That's right. Do that next quote.
Brew me a cup for a winter's night, for the wind howls loud and the furies fight. That's by Minna Thomas Antrim. I don't know who Minna is, but I love the quote. So dirt.
So I did find a Life is Better with Tea website. This person has everything you'd ever want to know about tea, blog post after blog post. And I have to warn people that her website is a bit of a rabbit hole, but she does have a lovely blog post about the best way to brew tea. And so this is where I want to ask you, Dee. Now, the Brits, they put milk in their tea. Do you put milk in your tea?
I do not, and it freaks them out when I've been over there because they want me to put milk in it. And then they assume because I don't put milk in it, I just drink tea straight, sometimes a little bit of honey, but not very often. They're like, well, do you want cream in it? Because they think I want cream. And I'm like, no, I really do not want cream. I have drunk it with milk, like when I've done a tea in Great Britain where you have, food.
Right.
And I don't want to go into the whole high tea, low tea. I don't want to do all that afternoon tea because it's all very specific. But say I'm going to have scones, gluten-free scones with my tea. I might do what they call a milky tea then, but doubt it. I did it over there. I thought it was kind of just okay.
Well, and then they not argue, but they have long discussions about, do you put the milk in the cup first or do you put the milk in the cup after you've poured the tea? And I found the answer.
What do you think? Yeah, I mean, what answer did you find?
So if you brew your tea in a pot and then you're pouring the tea from the pot into the cup, put the milk in first. Okay. Pour the tea on top of the milk. If you're brewing the tea in the cup, brew the tea, pull the tea bag out, and then finish filling up the tea cup with the rest milk. That's what the guy said.
I'm going to guess this is to keep the milk from curdling. But the milk that I've had in Great Britain doesn't have any cream in it. It's usually kind of skimmy. So, and that's another conversation for a whole nother day about, they don't do half and half in their coffee either. It's
just different. They do like a good biscuit, as they call it, to go with their tea.
Which is cookie. It's a cookie.
Which is a cookie. All right. So, Dee, what's your favorite?
Cleared all that up.
Yeah. What's your favorite tea?
So my real true all-time favorite tea is a tea called Betty's Tea Room from Yorkshire. So in Yorkshire, there are Betty's Tea Rooms all over. And Yorkshire is Harrogate. The capital is Harrogate. And Harrogate is where Yorkshire blend tea comes from. And I actually saw the place where Yorkshire tea is made. And Taylor's of Harrogate owns a portion of all the Betty's tea rooms. So when Bill and I were in Yorkshire all those years ago, I went to go buy myself some Yorkshire Gold tea, which is can be kind of hard to find here. And they were like, "Oh, you just buy that in the grocery store. Why wouldn't you just go buy Betty's? Because Betty's is the good tea." Well, it is really good tea. It has bigger leaves. They have a tea room blend, but I don't know if I can order it to get it here in the United States.
That Taylor's of Harrogate. So there was a grocery store here that started to carry that.
Right.
And I bought some. It was a little pricey, but I mean to tell you, that was delicious tea.
It is great.
I was very upset when they stopped carrying it. And you can order Taylor's of Harrogate. You can order that online.
Yes,
and that is very, very good.
You just can't order Betty's. So, from what I can see, you can
I bet
also
it tastes close.
The one I order most of the time is Yorkshire Gold, which is also made by Taylor's of Harrogate. It's a daily tea. And they also have Yorkshire Red. Don't waste your time on Yorkshire Red. It's not very good. And then I also like Tetley's loose tea that comes vacuum packed. They all do. And they're really good. I mean, they know their tea. Their tea is better than our tea. I'm just going to say it. And I've tried a lot of American teas, and it's just not as good. Now, if someone listens to this and wants to send me a pack of their tea, I'll give it a try. What's your favorite?
So my current favorite, but I do like that Taylor's of Harrogate, but I just couldn't find it in the store anymore. So
Amazon.
nuts.com, nuts.com is a website. They have tea, and it comes in little mesh bags, so it doesn't have that paper taste. Mm-hmm. And their Earl Grey is quite good. And what's nice about it is you can actually see the leaf particles. It's not that dust. Like, I don't want to say which brand's Lipton. I don't want to say or out anybody, but some of them is just like dust. But this, you can see the actual leaves, and it's very good. I have a cup every day or two.
Guess what? Taylor's of Harrogate makes Earl Grey. I bet it's really good.
That's the one I love.
Oh, from nuts.com? Nuts.com has the Taylor's of Harrogate Earl Grey?
I'm sorry. Nuts.com has basic Earl Grey. It's good. Taylor's of Harrogate Earl Grey is better.
Yes, it is.
But I haven't taken to ordering that anywhere because I found this and it's good enough, and let's move on. We will take suggestions from our listeners for teas we should try.
Oh, look. Taylor's also has a China rose petal loose leaf. I think we need to buy that for ourselves as a congratulations.
I think we do. Okay, so this is going to cost me some money, this episode, but that's okay. Many times I find myself buying something right afterwards. But again, if a listener has a tea they love and would like to recommend to us, we are taking recommendations.
Always. So let's now talk about tea kettles. I used to do one on the stove, but I switched to an electric tea kettle, and you have an electric tea kettle.
I do, and I used to have one. I cheaped out on myself, and I did not like it. It just took forever to heat it up. Mm-hmm. So last summer, I bought a KitchenAid kettle with an infuser, and in the pistachio green, of course. This baby heats the tea up so fast, the water, I should say. So I use that every day, and I use filtered water, and yum, yum, yum.
Do you do like 1 cup at a time, or do you put it in a teapot?
I do 1 cup at a time.
So my favorite tea kettle is from Great Britain, and it's called a Russell Hobbs. And I've had the same one for now a long time. And it also heats up the water really fast. I also use filtered water, which is better. Actually, I use distilled water, which I have a distiller because I live out in the country and I have really hard water. So for all my appliances, I use a distiller. And then I actually make a pot of tea, and I use a Brown Betty teapot, but mine is blue because my favorite color is blue.
Very nice. And the thing I was going to say I saw, and, going down the rabbit hole of tea, I saw where you should never boil your water twice.
Nope, you shouldn't.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so if, sometimes I'll just leave it in the teapot and it's a little bit warm, and then I top off my tea, but if I'm going for a second cup, I have to start all over because you don't want to boil it twice. Something about removes all the oxygen. Your tea will be really flat or something.
It makes your tea flatter. So that's pretty much it on this aspect of the tea rabbit holes. We're going to do rabbit holes in a minute, and you have a quote first.
This morning's tea makes yesterday distant. Author unknown.
So I like that one. The reason I said rabbit holes and rabbit holes is because this whole episode is a bunch of rabbit holes. Have you noticed?
Oh, it's a bunch of rabbit. Yes, I have.
So should I talk about my rabbit hole first, or do you want to talk about yours?
Yeah. Well, my rabbit hole goes in a whole different direction, so go ahead.
So I went down the Betty's tea rabbit hole and tried to find Betty's tea, and I never did find it, except it looks like you might be able to order it as a gift pack with biscuits and other stuff. But here's my problem with it. It isn't the loose leaf Betty's tea. It is it's the one in the little paper deals. I don't like tea bags.
The tea bags.
I don't like tea bags. And I don't like the plastic tea bags either. So I won't be buying that Betty's tea. I do have a funny story I just thought of about the Betty's tea. You want to hear it?
I do want to hear. I'm always up for a good, funny story. You know that.
So we were in the Betty's Tea Room gift shop, which is right next to the Betty's Tea Room, which is the best tea room ever, I thought. Unless there's just some little local tea room that's better. But these are pretty great. And so we're in the little gift shop, and I'm not understanding about what you can buy. And so they had this glass container of tea, and I took it over to the shop owner and said, I want to buy this. And this guy looked at me like I was crazy because it was kind of big. And he goes, no, ma'am. They're in the little canisters next to that. Basically, it was display only. And I was pretty embarrassed. I want to take over all the tea. All the tea is all mine. So anyway, that was my rabbit hole, was trying to find Betty's tea, because then this discussion of tea made me want it again, but I'm not willing to buy it in tea bags. I'll just go buy some Taylor's of Harrogate, which is really good. And then also on a totally different subject, but one we talked about I think the week before, was puzzles. I've been doing puzzles, and the cat and I and puzzles do not blend well together. She likes to steal the pieces and chew them all up. So I found this great puzzle holder that not only holds your puzzle and lets you cover the whole thing up so she can't get to it, but then you also can do, you know how when you do a puzzle, you'll do sections, like say
yes.
of a house, or sections of certain kind of grass or whatever. It has little inserts, and you can put all your sections on that. So
that's good.
So it's a pretty good little deal, and we might link to it. Well, we will link to it. Okay, your rabbit hole. Okay.
So, Dee, something snapped in my brain, and I used to do cross stitch, and I don't think I've done it for like 25 years, but I have all the stuff. I went in the back bedroom, and everybody's got a back bedroom where like stuff ends up that you're like getting rid of, but not getting rid of, putting it out of sight. I opened the drawers, found all my cross stitch supplies, and I'm cross stitching again. I did a little project just to get my fingers going again and figure out, like, how do you put this on the hoop? And
yeah. So how do you make those little stitches with arthritic fingers?
Yes. I found a large project where I had done all the cross stitch part, and now it just needs outlining and lazy daisy stitches. And so I've started on that, and I got my own another project. And anyway.
Good. Fun. What a fun
There's
one.
I have a rabbit hole, the other rabbit hole I should tell you about that I didn't put in the show notes.
Oh, but you did put 2 more rabbit holes at the bottom of your cross stitch.
Yeah, the Lost Ladies of Garden Writing, BB Miles, from a few weeks ago. I got her 2 books, opened them up, and then there's another person that I'm like, oh, I got to find out about this person. Mm-hmm. But before I did all that, I finished reading a brand new book called The Mitford Affair by Marie Benedict.
Oh, yeah. And now, is this a novel about the Mitford sisters?
It is, and she writes historical fiction, and she's written about Clementine Churchill. I'm drawing a blank now. Agatha Christie.
I read the one about Clementine, and I think I read the Agatha Christie.
Yeah, the other Mrs. Christie, it's called. So she takes real historical events and fictionalizes them. So the Mitford Affair is about the 3 oldest sisters, Nancy, Diana, which I think they call her Dinah, and Unity, which they're not the 3 oldest sisters, but they're the primary ones in the book. And they mention Pamela briefly, and they mention Jessica, who they call Decca, briefly. their stories. Very little about Debo, who became the Duchess of Devonshire.
Yeah,
But I'm
Debo,
telling you,
but we didn't we do a whole rabbit hole about Debo, and we went and looked at all these
we did.
videos. Isn't that the same
We
Debo?
did. Yes.
Oh,
But
cool.
this book is really about the other Mitford sisters, particularly the two that became friends with the world's most evil man, Adolf Hitler.
Oh, that's right, because one of them married a guy who was in the upper echelons. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
two.
So of course, after I read the book, I do more rabbit hole searching and go on YouTube, and you can actually find interviews from when they were elderly, some of them. But I was pleased that Marie Benedict, I read the Kindle version, and at the end they had some notes for like book clubs and stuff. Mm-hmm. And she wrote the book from Unity's perspective, from Diana's perspective, from Nancy's perspective. And so, she said, and I'll put it in my own words, you throw up a little in your mouth about how Unity was so infatuated with Adolf Hitler. Mm-hmm. And Diana too. And I didn't realize how inside the inner circle of Adolf Hitler those two were.
They were.
Man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man sakes. But anyway, that is totally off gardening. I clipped one little tiny quote from the book that was kind of gardening related to tie it all back. And I'll read it to you. She said, certain Mitfords have become like an insidious weed planted into the English soil with the hopes that we choke out the native plants. I must be a relentless gardener and assess this strange new growth. Must I rip out these weeds by the roots? And I believe that was Nancy talking about her two sisters.
So while you were talking about her, I looked up Marie Benedict because I've read several of her books. I read The Only Woman in the Room, which was great.
I read that one.
I read The Mystery of Mrs. Christie, which was great.
Yes.
I think I've read Lady Clementine, but I might have read a different Clementine instead. She is a big deal. She's a really big deal. She also wrote The Personal Librarian, which is her most famous book, Carnegie's Maid, which is her second most famous book. She's a big deal. She has written 34 novels.
Yeah, she trained as a lawyer.
I think some of these they're counting her ones that have been translated into other languages.
Yeah. But anyway.
34. Anyway, if people haven't read The Only Woman in the Room, that's another great one. So I really like her. I didn't realize this was the same person.
So let's do our garden commissions because we have managed, as one does when one grabs a cup of tea, you just begin talking and the next thing you know, we're almost to 48 minutes. Let's get going, Dee. I've got to go. Snatches up her purse and runs out the tea room.
I'm just keeping we're on garden commissions. I'm just keeping my houseplants and such alive. Truly, that's about it. It's super cold here. We turned off the sprinkler. Last week was warmer, so I did a bunch of garden coaching and I'm open for garden coaching. So if people need help, I'm available, but not until it warms up. So busy.
And we should say help in the Oklahoma City area primarily.
Right. I'm not coming to Indianapolis. You'll have to talk to Carol about that. And she doesn't garden coach, so don't even try. Okay, go ahead.
So the weather is turning cold again after a very lovely day on Saturday. So microgreens are growing. And I've got something new I'll talk about next week that I'm doing with microgreens, believe it or not. I might do some more winter sowing because as I get more jugs, I'll just figure something to plant in them. Also bought some supplies for indoor seed sowing, so I'll start mapping out, have I got all the trays and everything that I need, and that is it.
I have a question about winter sowing. How deep did you put the potting soil in your
I think
containers?
It's 1.5 to 2 inches. It's not great.
Okay.
It's not very deep. And I just used regular potting soil.
There you go.
All right.
Let's wrap this up.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Gardenangelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. This might not be the podcast episode that you want to do that for. Just hang with us. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
Absolutely give us a 5-star review for this episode, and be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
It felt like we wandered today, but sometimes we do. So subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelus, at substack.com, which is also linked to in our show notes.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing.
And you can now also give us a contribution through our Substack newsletter or on Buzzsprout if you'd like to. It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate this week. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.